Hello and welcome to the Mental Perk podcast, where we focus on real people, real issues, and real talk. I'm Carla Hutcherson, a licensed professional counselor.
And I'm Brandy Mock, entrepreneur, author, and community leader.
We are here to talk about all things mental health, whether it's daily stress, academic and work pressures, managing a diagnosis, or suicidal and self-harm behaviors. We want this to be a space of non-judgment, honest talk, and destigmatizing mental health issues. Most of all, we want to provide you the support, encouragement you need to win your everyday battles. Today, we want to welcome Brooke Castillo. She's a licensed professional counselor. Brooke worked at Children's Health back on the Spark team when I was there, so we worked together, and she's just an amazing person. She was a team lead with Spark, and she was also a clinical manager of the Spark and the Depression Clinic. One thing about Brooke is she had an upward trajectory of her career. She was really moving and grooving at Children's and really growing and developing as a person and as a career. And then she got this news about her second born. She was still pregnant with him at the time. Brooke, I'm going to let you tell me a little bit about that experience when you got some devastating news.
Yeah, so first off, thank you for having me today. Like Carla mentioned, I felt like my career was really going well and our family life was going well, and we were all excited to have another baby boy joining us. It was March of 2020 when we had our anatomy scan for our second born. If you can think back to March of 2020, that is right when the whole country shut down. Dallas County had just gone into lockdown, and the world was just turning upside down. That is when we had our anatomy scan, and because of COVID restrictions, I had to go by myself to that appointment. To be honest, I was really excited about it. Even not having my husband there, I was still feeling good about it. I was excited to be there. That's typically a really exciting appointment when you get to see all the pictures of your baby. And we actually already knew the gender. We did the genetic screening ahead of time. So we already knew that, but we were still excited. And so, I felt really good going into the appointment. And I honestly did not really have any worries or concerns. But quickly in that appointment, I could tell something was wrong.
Sonotype. What is that person called?
The technician,
Yes, quickly in that appointment, the technician was spending a lot of time focusing in the heart area of the baby. And of course, I'm looking at the screen, and I don't know what everything is, but I can tell that she's just spending a lot of time in one area. And so it was at that point that I started feeling a little bit anxious. And then when the tech said that they needed to step out of the room and go grab the doctor, at that point I knew something was wrong. I did not think about the severity of what I was about to hear, but anytime they've got to bring the doctor in to take a look, you just know that something's not how it's supposed to be. And so my doctor came in, took a look, and that is when she shared the news with me that there was something wrong with my baby's heart. And I think in that moment, I just became numb, not really knowing.
I can't imagine. No, that's just, you're just in shock at that point.
Yes. And my doctor could not confirm the diagnosis, but she did get out a piece of paper and a pen, and she drew what she saw in that anatomy scan. And what she saw was that his right ventricle was, either very small or missing. But that's all the information she could give me. And then said, we're going to refer you over to the Children's Hospital, where they'll do a fetal echo. You'll meet with the cardiology team, get a formal diagnosis and treatment plan. And so kind of all I heard in that initial appointment with my doctor was something was wrong with my baby's heart. I was alone in that appointment, and I left.
And it probably started to sound like Charlie Brown Teacher, right? Like it just was this womp womp. It was just this noise in the background because you just got this huge shock.
Yes.
And with your experience in counseling and therapy, did the counselor kick in, or was it just I'm a human, me mode kick in, and you were just, but just hearing you talk about the COVID, your husband couldn't be there. These are all moments you celebrate together, and you're getting this news. I can't imagine you getting into the car and just not knowing this baby's growing inside you. You just got really a diagnosis of you don't know what yet. How do you call your husband and tell him this?
Yeah. And that's what I did. I got out my phone and I called him, and I don't think I even said a word, and he just knew.
Ugh.
Like, he just knew something was wrong, and I just started sobbing on the phone. He said, come home, let's talk about it. But yeah, I think I was just a human in that moment. Like, I don't think I was pulling out any of my counseling skills that I'm trained to use. Yeah. I felt numb, I felt in shock, and really just unsure of what even was going on. Even hearing that they couldn't see the right ventricle and we're going to have to see the cardiology team. We did see them 3 days later. So it was a very quick turnaround.
That's great.
Yeah.
I mean,
yes.
So it wasn't a lot of time just sitting at home, like
an hour's a long time for you, I'm
Yes.
sure.
and you were part of the children's family, and
Yeah.
they were taking care of you in this moment.
Yes, we got in very quickly, which was a huge blessing, again, given the state of the country at that time.
Yeah.
Like, they weren't seeing a lot of patients in the hospital. So we did get in soon, and I think going into that appointment, like, I knew something was wrong. I knew we were going to hear hard news. But I did not really feel prepared for the severity of the news we were going to hear.
Have you ever heard of CHD before then?
I had not.
So let's tell them what it is. CHD is coronary heart disease, right?
Well, congenital heart disease,
Okay.
is what they call it, CHD for short, given that it's a heart defect that a child is born with. So not something you acquire later on in life, but you were born with this heart defect.
And I was looking it up. There's like up to 15 different types of CHD, right? Can you tell us a little bit about Theo's?
Yeah. And, there are so many different types, and something that I've learned that you can have the exact same diagnosis as someone else, and your trajectory can be very different. So Theo is diagnosed with tricuspid atresia, hypoplastic right heart syndrome. So what that means is his tricuspid valve did not develop during pregnancy, which resulted in his right ventricle not developing. And so, kind of to put in really simple terms, he was born with half a heart. He is missing his right ventricle.
Wow.
So, and I was also looking, and it's like 1% of births will end up with a CHD, and that's roughly about 40,000 kids a year.
Yes. So they, and what's crazy to me is, like, you asked, had I heard of CHD? And I had not, but it's the most common birth defect. And so what's mind-blowing to me is it's the most common birth defect, but most people don't know about it. You don't hear about it unless you know someone that has personally been affected by it.
Yeah, and I was, looking at the type that Theo had, and when I was reading about this, it was they categorized them as critical and non-critical, and that Theo has the critical version, and that can have a lot of long-term issues.
Yes, and when we met with the cardiologist for the very first time with that fetal echo, that's what we heard. This is a life-threatening disease. There's no cure right now for it. There's scientists out there working hard to try to find that cure, but as of right now, 2023, there's no cure. And that cardiologist, I think what was just really kind of set us back and, really made me feel in shock in that appointment was, I asked, what does this mean for his future? And she had to be real honest and say, we don't know. His future is unknown. The medical advancement has come such a long way for CHD, but, it's still relatively new. So there's not people in their 70s, 80s living with his heart defect because they didn't have the treatment for it at that time.
Correct.
And so there's not, long-term data that they can share with families. Like, we had to hear, like, we don't know what his future is going to be like. We learned about there's a 3-stage operation process for kids with his diagnosis, and he's had his first 2 open heart surgeries. He'll have another open heart surgery this coming year. But after that, you hope that keeps his heart functioning for a very long time. But if not, then we're looking at a heart transplant.
So walk us through the first surgery he had. How old was he exactly? And what was that surgery? What was the reason for that surgery? Was it to keep him living? Was it to reset some things? What was that like?
Yeah, so his first heart surgery, to be honest, is probably like the most traumatizing that we've experienced because, you know, Theo kind of surprised everyone. He continues to surprise everyone.
We love that,
a lot of spirit.
I love that.
But, you know, after he was born, we spent time in the NICU, and then we spent time on the cardiology floor. And all the doctors, you know, observed and examined, and he had to have a heart cath done. But then after that, they said, you know what, I think he's actually, you know, in a really good place. We don't think he's going to need the first heart surgery that's in this 3-stage series. Like, we think his heart's going to be healthy enough where y'all are going to go home and you're going to come back when he's bigger, between like 4 and 6 months, and that's when he'll have his next one. And so to hear that news, I mean, we were feeling so hopeful and so good. And so we actually went home about 3.5 weeks after him being born, and just trying to, you know,
I
Be as
can't
normal as
imagine.
possible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm thinking, are you just is he with you 24/7? I mean, it's like you got the baby monitors, but is that enough? Like, I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, I'm thinking as a mother right now, and I'm going, I don't even.
And then she's got a 3-year-old or a
Yeah.
2.5-year-old at home.
yeah, he was.
So all the joy of bringing home a newborn, of having a baby, was delayed. Obviously, you're in the hospital for 3 weeks with Theo, and then coming home is a joyful moment. But for you and your husband, I can't imagine. Explain your thoughts. Explain your emotions as you brought him home that first time.
Yeah, we were obviously thrilled
Yeah.
about coming home, but also terrified
course.
at the same time. So he came home with a feeding tube, an NG tube that goes through your nose and down to your tummy. And so we had to learn how to insert that before we could go home. And we had to learn CPR, which thankfully working at Children's prepared me for. You know, they taught us those safety skills. He had a pulse ox that he came home with to monitor his oxygen. So we had those safety measures in place. But it was like, I mean, with a healthy baby, you're hypervigilant looking at your baby all the time. And then with Theo, it was like amplified. And then
How did you sleep? I bet y'all couldn't even sleep, right? I mean, did
Not well.
you just take turns sleeping so that someone was watching the baby all the time? Or, I mean, it was exhausting.
Yeah, we had him, you know, in his bassinet right next to me, and with his pulse ox turned on, and, you know, we didn't sleep well.
Yeah.
You know, going back to his first surgery, you know, we were at home, we were adjusting. We saw our cardiologist every single week, eyes on him. We were doing it. And then there was one morning, we had seen our cardiologist, I think maybe 2 days before this happened. And again, he was doing well, no big concerns, right? But there was one morning that I woke up in a panic because his pulse ox is just beeping at me over and over again. And I look over, and his oxygen was incredibly low. Immediately turn on the lights, and I look at him, and he's blue, and he's sweating profusely everywhere, and, you know, struggling with breathing. And so we immediately called 911. They got there super quickly, and we're rushing off to the hospital. And I know we'll talk more about siblings here later, but, you know, his brother Noah was awake when this happened, and, you know, he's watching me carry Theo out and rush into the ambulance. And so I can only imagine for a 2-year-old what was going through his mind, all the questions that he had. Got rushed to the emergency room. They stabilized him in the emergency room. You know, they do an echo. His heart is looking like it should. And so doctors are over here just scratching their heads, like, what in the world is going on? What's making his oxygen drop like that? What's making him turn blue? We're not really getting answers. But he's stable, and so they put us up onto the cardiology floor just for further observation. And I always say now, like, I truly think it was God's plan all along to make sure we were in the hospital when we needed to be. Because that night when we were on the cardiology floor, I just knew something was wrong. Like, he just cried and cried and cried.
And, they always talk about a mother's instinct. Like, sometimes the doctors get so confused, but the mothers are like, I'm trying to tell you there's something wrong with my kid.
Yes.
And it's like you just have to keep pushing because you can't get people to listen fast enough.
Yeah, you're the only advocate, for sure.
Yes, 100%.
And, becoming a heart mom has really had to teach me how to advocate for my children and push and push and push until my voice is heard. And I kept saying, like, something is wrong. And then the next morning, we had our sweet nurse, Jordan, with us, who still to this day we see in the clinic, and we just love her. And, she also said, Brooke, I think something's wrong. Like, I think he's trying to tell us something. I think these are warning signs. And she pushed and pushed to share her concerns as well. And the next thing we knew, Jordan was in the room with us when this happened, but he coded. And next thing we know, we've got the ICU team rushing into our hospital room. As a mom, I'm just sitting there helpless. Again, I'm by myself because of COVID restrictions. My husband couldn't be there. And in the meantime, my mom lives out of town, and, she's on her way to come to the house to try to be there for Noah so my husband can get to the hospital. But he gets rushed down to the ICU, and by the time I gather my things and I get down there, I walk into the ICU room, and it's just horrifying. I mean, it's just filled with nurses and doctors, and a doctor looks at me and says, we're going to have to intubate him. And I kind of knew what that was, but I had never seen him intubated before, and so I didn't really know what that was going to be like. And so as they start to intubate him, he crashes, and next thing I know, I'm watching CPR be performed on him, which is scary in general to watch, but to see it on an infant is just, again, horrifying. And so CPR is being performed on him, and I think at that point, I can't tell you what I was doing or how I looked, but I do remember there was a nurse who just put her arms around me and started hugging me. And I know I'm harping on the COVID, but again, like, that was a time when we were scared to touch anyone.
Yeah.
In 2020.
So for a nurse to hug you.
Yes. I mean,
big.
that showed the human instinct, right?
Yeah.
Like, forget all these safety protocols we have in place.
This is life.
She was a human in that moment, and she hugged me. And at that point, I think things were getting really scary. And so the doctor said, Mom, do you want to step out of the room? And I must have said yes. I can't tell you for sure, but they, escorted me out of the room and went into a conference room, and I had the social worker there and the chaplain there just kind of sitting with me. It was just, I think that was like the first real moment I had where I thought, like, I'm going to lose my baby. Like, the thoughts of, like, we're not taking him home started crossing my mind. And I've had those thoughts many, many times since then. Thankfully, they were able to stabilize him, and the surgeon came in and said, we're going to do open heart surgery tomorrow morning.
Oh, wow.
It was considered an emergency surgery, not something they had planned for, but it was the BT shunt. And so that next morning, they took him back, and he had the BT shunt placed.
So is this the BT shunt? Was that because they figured out why he crashed, or was this we don't know what caused this? This is what we think it could be.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that it was the best solution at that time. Of he wasn't getting enough blood flow, and this was going to help get more blood flow to his heart, to his lungs, all of that. And so, they took him the next morning, and, it's waiting hours and hours.
The worst waiting ever. I mean, there's no relaxing. It's just constant, terror of what's going to come through those doors, right?
Yes. You hate to say it, but, like, you just think the worst in these moments.
How can you not? You're not prepared for anything other than dreadful news. I mean, you found out when you're pregnant the situation, all the unknowns, and then to see him code and them not know why he coded, and for you to kick in that motherly instinct, and then Jordan, is that the nurse? Jordan to say, hey, I mean, this is to me very much so a God thing, for sure.
And Brooke, this is where I can relate because my daughter also had a life-threatening birth defect. And so I just remember mine was way pre-COVID, and we had a whole room full of family, and you're alone. And that's just horrifying.
Yeah, it breaks my heart thinking,
Yeah. My husband was able to be there the day of surgery.
That's great.
And I think 24 hours maybe after. I mean, they were real strict on how many people could be at bedside. It was like surgery, maybe 24 hours before or after, or like end of life. Like it was, very strict, understandably, but in that moment, you need your family.
Yes.
100%. And that's what I was thinking. I was thinking, how are y'all doing this? Like, we had our parents there. We had lots of support. We had people from our church. And it's just like, I can't imagine just the two of you sitting there and not knowing what's going to come through those doors.
Yes. So yeah, it was incredibly scary. Surgery went well, thankfully. After surgery, we had lots of complications. Again, Theo just puzzles people. There were times where the doctors are like, we don't know why this is happening, but it's happening. And, something I've learned over these 3 years is Theo is in charge. And, it's between Theo and God a lot of the time. They've got their plan in place. And
I love
we're
your
just
little
here for the
message
ride.
group. It's tough like Theo, right? And so
I love that.
And so, and he is. He's just full of toughness.
He is a fighter for sure. And, he's always been fighting. And we, after that first surgery, I think he was 1 month old when that happened, August actually of 2020. So just about 3 years ago. And we spent months in the hospital afterwards.
Now, let's go through all that, because not only are you dealing with a sick child, but how is this affecting you financially? Like, you've got a husband that has to work. I'm sure you might have been on maternity leave, but all these things are playing in. You're having to readjust who's taking care of your other healthy child, and then you having to be at the hospital, your husband. I mean, how was the chaos around you? How'd you feel during that time? And did you even think about any of those things? Because, I can only imagine I'd be thinking just my child's health, but then everything else falls apart around you, right? So,
but it can't. That's the whole thing. It can't fall apart, right? Because you have this other child, and you have to make sure someone's taking care of him, and he's getting passed from person to person to person.
During COVID.
Yes, exactly. And that just it's difficult.
Yes. It was incredibly challenging. I feel very blessed that my mom was able to, she basically moved in with us for 6 months. So, she dropped everything and she moved in with us to take care of Noah. He wasn't in school yet, and so it was just kind of the two of them spending really good quality time together. So I feel very blessed that she was able to do that. If she wasn't able to move in, I honestly don't know what we would have done.
Yeah.
My husband had great paternity leave, thankfully, and just a job that is incredibly supportive. Still today, if Theo has a doctor's appointment that Luis really wants to be at, they support him in being able to go. And so him having a supportive job also helped. I was on maternity leave, and, the children's family was just incredible. I would have them visit. Carla visited in the ICU. I would have people bring me coffee. I felt love and support every day being there. I think in the back of my mind, I knew, there's no way I'm going to make it back to work. But at that time, I wasn't ready to let that go, because we still didn't know what the outcome was going to be once we finally made it home. But once he had his second open heart surgery at 4 months old.
So small.
I know, they're so tiny at that.
Yes.
So small.
And I think it was after that surgery when I realized, I have to let go of my old self. I'm not going to be able to go back to work. I have a new role in life, and that is to be a medical mama to Theo.
I love that term, because
too.
that's exactly what it is.
I do too.
Yes, because I think it was at that time that I realized, we are going to, hopefully we'll make it home, but this is not going to be an easy road for us. And so, it was at that point that I had to share with my team at Children's that, I wasn't going to be able to come back. And again, they just were so loving about my decision. I did not feel, judged in any way. I think all of them were like, of course you're not coming back, Brooke. Like, you need to be there for your family. Yeah, a big adjustment for sure.
One of the things I want to talk about is because we're talking about all of the heart issues, but what we do know is these kids who have CHD, they have multiple other healthcare issues. It's not just about the heart. And like 60% of them have multiple complicated medical needs. Can you talk a little bit, because I know Theo has been part of that 60%.
Yes. And when I think back to when we first learned about his diagnosis, the doctor said, like, it's very common to have other complications or issues that he may have to deal with, but I truly was not, like, fully prepared for just how extensive that was going to be. It makes sense now. The heart's a really big organ in your body, and so it affects other parts of your body, but, he's had feeding issues since birth. So I mentioned he had a feeding tube. He got that as a newborn. And he still has a feeding tube in right now. He has a G tube. Thankfully, we're at the end stage of that, where he's eating now by mouth and taking his medicine by mouth. But, he's had a feeding tube from newborn to 2.5, almost 3 years old, of being dependent on that. So lots of feeding issues. We see GI, so he's had an extensive GI struggles. Which also results in us having to stay in the hospital for a very long time because he couldn't digest his food well. He couldn't keep things down, which then makes nutrition a concern. And how does your body grow if you can't keep food down? And so GI has been a big thing. Who else do we see? We see nephrology for his kidneys.
Yeah.
So he also has had some kidney disease, which has improved over the years, but that's been a concern. And, of course, some of the medications for his heart kind of takes a beating on the kidneys. So something we keep monitoring.
On the kidneys and stuff, is all these other organs that are just struggling to keep up. Is it because of the blood flow that's going through his heart that's not feeding to these other organs? Is that why they feel like he's struggling in these other areas? And again, is that very common with his condition?
Yes.
And were you aware of it when he got diagnosed, or did you start to see they really don't know the effects it's going to have, or is it you should expect this? I mean, did you know you should expect these issues?
Not to the full extent.
Okay.
So, and I get, doctors, every kid's different.
Sure.
And so I think, when they explain things, it's a possibility. It
Right.
could be. We don't know for sure. But I think when I heard that, I kind of just thought, well, that's a possibility, but I'm not going to expect that to happen when we've kind of all the things that were a possibility we've kind of experienced. And so it is very common. So many of our heart families that we're close with, their kiddos struggle in the same way that Theo does. So we knew about it, but not really to the full extent. Mm-hmm. And, it is a lack of blood flow to other organs. I mean, the GI tract takes a beating because the blood flow isn't as good as it should be. Theo is also very small for his age. And so we see endocrinology for that. They're just kind of monitoring to see if this is like a growth hormone concern or, the doctor there explained to me, she said, Brooke, when a kid is born with such complex medical needs, like their body is in survival mode for so long that like his body has been focused on staying alive, not so much about growing.
Yeah.
And so let's give him time to keep growing and letting his body grow on its own. And that was really eye-opening to me to think about, like, well, that makes sense.
It
like,
does, doesn't it?
The body is in
really
survival
does.
mode as an infant to stay alive and is not concerned about the other parts of just healthy growth.
Yeah. What we get concerned with on a day-to-day basis, yours has all been turned upside down.
Yeah, exactly.
So normal's not normal for Theo.
No.
But the fact that he is a little fighter, like you're saying, you know what? It's those teaching moments. They're teaching us something through their illness, which to me is amazing. And then what the doctor said to you, about just, he's in fight mode. He doesn't know anything else. I mean, to me, I would have almost gotten a little sense of peace of knowing, I never thought of it that way.
Well, they also get in this fight mode because so many things are being done to them. They're getting poked and prodded and
yeah.
going through all these machines, and they just get tough and angry, right? I mean, it's amazing how many people it takes to hold down a small child when they want to get off that table. So,
yes. We've heard like, wow, he's really strong for being so little.
I'm tired already.
I'm like, yes, he is. He's going to fight you tooth and nail because he doesn't like what you're doing right now. And that's something too that it is so hard to watch your baby have to endure painful things.
Yes, I can't imagine.
Completely out of his control, and it is painful. You can't deny that it's painful, some of the things that they're experiencing. And gosh, up until last year, so he just turned 3 in July.
Yay.
But I would say,
I know, that is such a milestone.
Yes.
I know.
Huge milestone.
Yeah.
But I would say up until last year, even walking into a doctor's office, he would lose it. Scream, cry.
I would too. Yeah.
Oh,
And
He's like, what's going to happen?
Yes. I mean, just terrified.
That's so funny because my daughter, she was in and out of the hospital so many times, and she would not tolerate white, because there's white sheets, people in white coats.
She's
so
like, this is a bad
she would
sign.
throw fits, and so everyone who came in had to take their white coats off. They had to put green sheets on the bed. Even if we stayed at hotels, no white sheets. She would have she would have a meltdown if there was anything white.
They remember.
So they do. It's very traumatizing, which is why I wanted to kind of talk about, because we are a mental health. Medical and mental health go hand in hand. And a lot of kids who have medical conditions also struggle with depression and anxiety. Have they talked to you a little bit about this? Have you seen Theo go through some of these things?
Yeah, so they have talked about it. At Children's, where our heart center is, they have a neurodevelopment team there, which is fantastic. And so starting at birth, they are already working with the kids on making sure their neurodevelopment needs are being addressed. And so Theo does yearly evaluations with the psychologist there. She's looking at a variety of different things, and then makes a recommendation based on what his needs are. And something he has struggled with is anxiety, that medical trauma that he's experienced. And so something we've been doing really this past year, as he's kind of gotten more into the toddler stage, we do a lot of medical play with him at home.
Yeah.
He gets to be the doctor almost all of the time.
He's like, I should be.
Right. He wants to be in control, but we do lots of medical play with him. He'll take his little doctor kit to his appointments. I have a cute picture of his cardiologist. He has a little baby doll he likes to carry around, and she's using her stethoscope on the baby doll first before him. And, he's used his stethoscope on nurses and doctors. And so being able to have that sense of control has been
absolutely
incredibly helpful for his anxiety. But we've also learned with him, that need for control is so important, and also just routine for him. As simple as like when he wakes up, hey, Theo, we're going to change your diaper. We're going to get dressed. We're going to take your medicine. We're going to eat breakfast. So like he knows what's coming, because he does not always adjust to quick changes very well.
His little life since the beginning,
Yes.
he's had nothing but quick changes. There's no
Yes.
preparation for it. He, going into wherever he's going, you don't even know what's going to happen, right? So it's kind of like, sometimes it's like he's just in panic mode, I would think. The anxiety, I can't imagine. What's your anxiety been like with all of this?
That's just what I was about to get to. I mean, because all of this, it was the first things you were thinking about were, I just got to save his life. You were in mama bear mode. You were focused. You were laser focused. And now you're at home and things have settled down. Let's talk about your mental health.
Yeah, so you're right. When we were in the hospital with him, I think for about 5-6 months total.
Wow.
In that time, I was just focused on his survival. Let's keep him alive. Let's get him home. Let's get him stable. And our sweet social worker would come and meet with me almost every day, and she would ask me, how are you feeling, Brooke? What are you experiencing? And I couldn't give her a lot.
Yeah.
And, she would say, like, I think you're in survival mode. You're focused on him. These feelings are going to come at some point. I want to make sure you're prepared for that. And, I've got my counselor brain, and the things that I've learned through my professional career. And when I think about it, so often I think counselors, we can think like, oh, my patient's avoiding how they feel. They don't want to go there. They're avoiding. But I now realize through all of this that I don't think I was avoiding. I truly think I was in survival mode where I really was not in a place to even notice how I was feeling. Those feelings, if they were present, I could not notice them in that moment.
And do you feel like that's a blessing in disguise that you didn't have all those emotions in a way now that you're able to reflect back?
Yes and no, because I say that because in the hospital, you just have so much support.
Yeah.
You've got a social worker, you've got a psychologist, you've got chaplains. I mean, you've got nurses who become like family to you. And then when we came home and, finally made it home and we're settling into being at home, all my emotions did come. And I quickly became just overwhelmed with emotion. And then I didn't have as much support in place. I had family, I had friends. I didn't have as much professional support as I did in the hospital. And, I definitely became overwhelmed. I realized quickly once we came home that I was experiencing depression and anxiety. And it was hard to talk about. It really was, because I felt like I still had to be very strong for my family. And I couldn't let myself just unravel because I was home with my family and, had 2 kids I had to take care of. And we just had so many doctor's appointments at first when we came home. I mean, I felt like we were just in a clinic every single day.
Yeah.
And so it was a struggle for sure. And that's when, when I realized, like, I need help. Like, I'm not doing well myself. I'm not taking care of myself. I could just feel myself unraveling is when I sought out therapy for myself.
And I'm thinking about everything that you're talking about, your experience, and then I also think about Luis, and he had to go back to work. He had to support you guys financially because now you're full-time caretaker. And I mean, just, being able to try to keep things together for the family and be there, that support for you. How did he manage through all that?
He's such a trooper. Like, he did have to go back to work, and I think he wanted to have a longer time away from work to be able to continue to support the family. And I think he recognized that I was struggling and I needed help, but he had to go back to work. Like, financially, we needed him to be employed. We have our insurance through him. And, thankfully, he's been able to work from home almost full time. And so he was physically in the home, which I think was really comforting for me. Just knowing, like, oh, he's here if there is an emergency.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's been hard for him. He also sees a therapist now because he's experienced his own, struggles through all of this. And that's like a whole other topic on heart dads, because they truly need a lot of support. They don't have nearly the same level.
We automatically assume that fathers are the ones that take on all of the stress of the family, and they do. They take on a lot of it. They're the soothers, they're the protectors, and just thinking what he's having, y'all can't fix the bait. You can't fix Theo.
Right.
Like, and we're fixers. Parents are fixers. And so I can't imagine that stress of just going, I just want to fix you, but I can't. And so I'm glad that he's taken that step to get the help, because it's both ways,
Absolutely.
And y'all are big in the advocacy for the CHD. Y'all are working with the organizations and trying to be there to support other parents. And I think that's amazing, the connections that you guys are building. Tell me a little bit about extreme emotional variance. I mean, you had to go from denial, just shock, denial, sadness, anger, this overwhelming grief. Where are you in that process now? Because you're still in the middle of it.
Yeah, it's such a good question. I feel like it's just a roller coaster ride. Like, we have moments where I feel pretty good. Like, oh, things are going well. I'm taking care of myself. Our family's going well. And then there's times where I can feel myself start to struggle again. And, I talk with my own therapist weekly on, there's no end to this, right? Like, there's no cure for his heart defect. We're not going to get to a stage where he's fixed and is a healthy boy. Like, this is lifelong for him. And so I think that's probably where I struggle the most, of being mom and wanting to fix things and protect him, and that's all out of my control. There's nothing I can do to make the outcome different for him. And so, the unknown of his future medically, I think, is just really still hard for me. And, I feel like I've grown tremendously as a human by having Theo in our life. It's been the scariest experience I've ever experienced, but also, he teaches us so much every single day. Like, we really look at all the small things and really, take one day at a time and find meaning in the small things. I've had to learn how to just let go of expectations and just see Theo for who he is, and he's going to do things on his own time, and that's okay. He's a joy. Like, he's the cutest kid ever, but, he, even during really, really hard moments, we'll be in the hospital, and he's still smiling. And so it's just moments like that I think really help keep me going, and to see Noah nurture his brother and comfort him. And Noah is very wise beyond his years, I think, for having experienced all of this. He helps keep me going too.
And we were to talk a little bit about that, because I think the Noahs get kind of put in the background, right? So through my own experience, I didn't always get to pay attention to really know how my son was doing, right? Because he was watching all of these things. He was seeing his sister with all these tubes, and it was very scary. So, does Noah talk about this? How do y'all support him? Does he have someone that he works with to help understand the processes that Theo's going through, so he understands what's going on when Theo goes to these appointments?
Yeah, so Noah was 2 when Theo was born, had just turned 2. He's 5 now. And he does talk about it a little bit. I definitely have picked up on that kids know far more than we think they do. And so we were given this red heart pillow with an anatomical heart on it after Theo's first heart surgery. And I caught Noah one day all on his own. He was sitting on the floor with Theo, and he was pointing at the heart to Theo, saying, "Theo, this is what a heart looks like inside your body. And this is the part right here that you weren't born with. And, like, God didn't give you this piece of your heart, and that's why you have to see the doctor." And I thought, oh my gosh, like, he really knows what's going on. So we do have conversations. I just have it mostly be on his timing. He will share that it can be scary at times. He wishes Theo didn't have a boo-boo on his heart. But he knows the doctors take care of him, and, Theo or Noah can basically give medication through a G-tube if you let him. Like, he's learned how to do that by watching. So we talk about it. We have not had him see a therapist yet, although with Theo having another open heart surgery this next year, that's something we're going to start now with Noah to kind of get him that support in place, get him prepared for that, because that is going to be a big adjustment for him.
And one thing they have at hospitals, they have the child life specialist. And
yes.
Not only do they work with the patient, but they'll work with the siblings. Have they stepped in, or has Noah been in that position to receive any of that kind of care?
Yeah, so he has not yet, because when Theo was in the hospital for so long in 2020, Noah was not able to visit, again, because of COVID restrictions. And so he was never there. He's never seen Theo in the hospital. And so he hasn't worked directly with the child life specialist yet. They provided us support as parents on this is what you can share with Noah, or this is what you can do with him. So indirectly they've supported, but they're fantastic. We call them miracle workers. Like,
yes.
Here comes a child life team, and you're like, everything's going to be good now. They got their pet therapy dogs. They're just wonderful. So that'll be a service, of course, for Noah during this next surgery.
Yeah.
I think for Noah, we really try on being very intentional on giving him special time with both of us as parents, because you're right, so much when Theo was born and we spent so much time in the hospital, Noah was kind of in the background. We did not get to spend as much time with him. We did not get to do fun things with him. He didn't get to go to preschool that year because it was too risky on getting sick and bringing it home and getting Theo sick. And so there is that period of time that, it's inevitable. Like, I have that mom guilt of, like, I wasn't there for Noah during that period of time. But we try now to be as intentional as we can.
But that's a whole new thinking about it. Theo's immunosuppressed, correct? So he's on all of these medications to keep his heart functioning. So the worry of just bringing anything in, whether it's you, your husband, does that stress you out?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about the hypervigilance of mothers who have medical needs babies. You're very hypervigilant, I'm sure.
Yes.
You're noticing everything.
It constantly keeps me anxious. School starts this next week, and I can already feel my anxiety rising because I know with Noah being in kinder, here comes germs back in our house. We're hoping for Theo to start a Mother's Day out this school year, and so exciting for him, yes, but also risky because he's going to be with other preschoolers. So yeah, it definitely keeps me anxious, definitely hypervigilant to things. It's been hard. It's gotten easier this past year, but it's been hard. We've had to miss out on a lot of things as a family because it was too risky. We missed family gatherings and holiday parties and birthdays and the things that we look forward to doing as a family. We just had to make that tough call of, Theo's health is far more important than going to that birthday party, and so we're going to have to miss out.
Yeah, those are tough decisions to make. I want to talk a little bit about the role of faith. You brought that out. How, some parents, when they go through something like this, they ask God why a lot, or, they question faith, or it makes their faith stronger. Where are you guys standing in all that?
Yeah, that's been a bit of a roller coaster ride as well. I will be very honest. When we first learned about Theo's diagnosis, I was incredibly angry with God. Why would he give me a baby with a severe heart defect? And I think I've let go of asking the why a lot, but it still happens. There's plenty of times where it still pops in my head of, why us, or why does it happen in general? Like, why do kids, any kind of illness, why are kids sick? And so I think that's been hard. I think it's been, again, a roller coaster ride. There's times where I really can lean in on my faith, and that's carried me through. And then there's times where I don't really want to lean in on that because I'm angry and it's disappointing and I just have questions. And, I think that personally, I think has been a challenge on that roller coaster ride. But, I think God has showed us over and over again that he's in control and there's reasons why things have happened. Yeah. I go back to his very first surgery and I shared, I now realize like it was all in God's plan for us to go by ambulance to the hospital, for him to stabilize and to be there when the true crisis happened. Because I think if we were home and he had coded, I don't know if Theo would still be here today. Exactly. But because we were already in the hospital,
so you see those little miracles that most of the time we would overlook, but you're seeing them.
Yes. And, the heart community is a very strong community. And I see miracles happen all the time. I've met some incredible families that heard the horrible news of there's nothing else we can do. You're going to go home on hospice, and their baby is alive and doing well. And there's no necessarily like medical answer for that, right? Like
there's not. Things
took a turn for the good, and I think it's moments like that where you can't deny
that there's something,
that there's a higher power that's involved here. And so I try to remember that, and again, I really try to just focus on day by day the blessings that we have with Theo.
Well, he is definitely a heart warrior, and we are so glad that you had the courage to share your story. I would like to give you a little plug if there's anything you would like to say about the heart community, anything you would like to plug, or be able to tell the audience of how they can help support the heart community.
Yeah, I would just share, I did not know about congenital heart disease prior to learning about Theo's heart defect. And I hear that often, that people just don't know about it. And so, becoming educated on CHD, and there's lots of great organizations out there that you can support. There's researchers out there working very hard on trying to find a cure for single ventricle patients like Theo. So there's ways that we can all get involved. Funding is needed for research. We need to be talking about it more often. Now, anytime I have a friend or family member who is expecting, I always share with them, in your anatomy scan, make sure you're asking the questions about all parts of the heart.
Yeah.
Wow.
If they say they just can't see it, say, I want to come back so you can look at it
Find
again.
it, yeah.
Yes,
Really
Yeah.
advocate because, it's a lifelong illness. And I think we all need to just be talking about it more and educating each other on it and really pushing for the funding to find a cure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you are out there in the audience and you have a heart for Heart Warriors, please give to the CHD programs and the research for this debilitating disease, and let's help save some children.
Yes.
Brooke, we are so impressed by you and
Yes.
your family, and we wish you all the very best. You are all very much Heart Warriors.
Well,
Yes.
thank you for having me today.
If you or anyone you know is struggling with mental health issues, please reach out to talk to someone you trust. Get connected to a mental health professional who can help you find ways to cope and ultimately feel better. If you are having suicidal or self-harm thoughts or thoughts of hurting another person, please go to the nearest ER, call 911, or contact the National Suicide Hotline at 988. Thank you for tuning in to Mental Perk. We hope our talk today highlighted real people working through real issues based on mental health. Our goal at Mental Perk is to make sure every one of you knows
You're worthy.
We're in this together.